Good morning and or afternoon to everybody. Thank you for joining us today. Now I'll actually introduce our speakers. So one of our speakers is Anatalio Ubalde, CEO of SizeUp, a small business assistance software used by economic developers nationwide. Our others are Jennifer Graves, the Deputy Director of Economic Development in Gilbert, Arizona, and Horton Hobbs, who's the Vice President of Economic Development for the Greater Springfield Chamber of Commerce in Springfield, Ohio. Jennifer and Horton are guest speakers. They're going to present some case studies of how they're responding to the crisis, and they're going to answer some questions at the end of the talk. So without further ado, we will jump into this thing. Anatalio, take it away.
Thank you so much. Welcome, everybody, to being here. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules. We're going to make it worth your while with some great resources and information. Just to qualify some of these things, the three of us, we are economic development professionals. We are not epidemiologists. We are not going to be talking about the science of coronavirus. We're going to be talking about the science of how economic development can respond to this global pandemic. I'm going to be discussing some specific resources, and Horton and Jennifer are going to be talking about some case studies. All of this information will be included in case studies in a white paper that will be made available to all of you. There are about 400 people who have registered for this. And I just want to thank one person who isn't here, Lee Johnson, who is a manager of economic development at the Tennessee Valley Authority, who today sent us an email saying he's canceling his reservation to be in today's webinar to allow others to join in because this is the beauty of economic developers sacrificing so that others can participate. So thank you to Lee. So the global economic impact of the novel coronavirus, also known as COVID-19, is the cause of much anxiety and speculation. Clearly, the first concern for everyone's well-being is that lives are protected and hopefully the crisis passes quickly. However, while the projected spread of the disease and its associated impacts on economic development are still in flux, many economic developers are seeking guidance on how the profession can responsibly manage in the midst of this developing and ongoing crisis. And that's what we're here for today. While public health, public policy, and businesses are working to respond to the impact of this coronavirus, so too must the profession of economic development. And there are specific responses that we all can take collaboratively with elected officials, partners, and local businesses to adapt to this challenging environment for the profession. So to get a sense about what's going on, we're going to do a poll. Now, in today's context of the coronavirus pandemic, what is your top priority in economic development? So just select one. Wow, that's a lot of information coming in. All right, keep voting. All right, I'm going to close this in 3, 2, 1. So here are the results. 70% overwhelmingly is our focus on assisting local businesses. But about 1/5 are maintaining existing economic development work. So basically continuing to do what you did before. 3% focused on laid off workers, and another 3% finding new ways to do customer prospecting, and 4% transitioning their business attraction and FDI tactics. Actions must be taken immediately by economic developers to address the urgent crisis facing the most at-risk local businesses and workers. I'm going to talk about these first. There are also economic development strategies to implement which address the more enduring operational challenges that this crisis and these types of crises create for economic development organizations and the new programs that can mitigate these problems. These can also make our organizations more resilient today, coming out of the coronavirus pandemic and into the long-term future. So we'll start with one of the big impacts is that vulnerable people and businesses are at the greatest risk. We know from surveys that over 74% of U.S. employees would experience difficulty meeting their current financial obligations. 28% of U.S. adults have no emergency savings. And 1 out of 5 U.S. households has already experienced a layoff or reduction of work hours due to the coronavirus pandemic. So these specific segments of society are the greatest economic risk as a result of this pandemic. And in some cases, the risk is economic, health, or both. But in general, these groups of at-risk workers are already economically disadvantaged, being in jobs that have some combination of less pay, security, health benefits, opportunity, and flexibility. So let's talk about them. The first is hourly workers, and these are oftentimes some of the lowest paid workers in society. And they may quickly have their hours cut back or eliminated as a result of declining business. And they're at high risk of not being able to cover necessities. They're also the only at work workers because not everybody can work from home. So if you think about barbers, physical therapists, athletic trainers, manicurists, salespeople, restaurant service, cashiers, all of them require physical contact, and they need to be at work to do this work. They're also the gig workers. These are the independent contractors. And because many of them do not have protections, this may make them even more susceptible to trying to continue work even if they're infected. Uber and Lyft drivers have been impacted especially hard as demand has dropped, and fears of being in close proximity to strangers in the car services touched by many people makes ride sharing undesirable. 1/4 of the US workforce is not currently entitled to sick pay. And so what's happening is these workers are being put in a situation where they have to face tough decisions. Like, do I stay home if I feel ill or go into work so I can have a paycheck? What do I do if my child's school is closed and I can't afford to stay off work? There are also the workers who are on public transit. And while public transit is shared by all economic classes in many urban areas, lower income workers may not have an option as an alternate way to get to work to avoid crowds on transit. In suburban and low density communities, it's often these low income people who use public transit while wealthier residents drive their car. So understand that these folks are putting themselves at risk just getting to work. Another group is small businesses and their employees, because these companies are more likely to be undercapitalized compared to big businesses and may not have the financial reserves to sustain a prolonged period of reduced revenue. But in almost all of our communities, they represent about 99% of all businesses and half of all jobs. According to a March 2020 survey from the National Federation of Independent Businesses, already 42% of small businesses reporting seeing slower sales, while 39% were experiencing supply chain disruptions. And in Seattle, 60% of small businesses are considering wage cuts and staffing cutbacks, while 35% say they may have to close. So keeping small businesses in business now is essential for the long-term economic viability of every community's economic development. So I've been working quite hard to get you all the information related to the highlights of the stimulus bill. And so let's talk about some of those. The good news is it is going to help many people, including some of these very at-risk businesses. One of the elements is that there's $350 billion in loans for small businesses to help them bridge their expenses for up to 10 weeks. So companies would not need to repay up to 8 weeks of the loan if they refrain from laying off employees or move by June to rehire employees that they have already laid off. There's also $500 billion in aid to airlines and other large corporations that have been hurt by a cratering of consumer demand amidst the crisis. And I think it's worth pointing out who got more bailout money. It was the large businesses. In terms of workers, those who lose their jobs, they are going to have expanded unemployment benefits for up to 4 months. And in some cases, this payment is going to be more than what they were making before the outbreak. These programs, they're designed to encourage companies to keep workers on the payroll, and so that they can also continue to be protected by their health insurance. For the household, there's going to be about $1,200 payment for each adult and $500 per child for households that earn up to $75,000 per year or $150,000 for couples. And then it's phased out for people who earn more than that. So what does this mean for some of our communities? Well, the cost of living and salaries is very different in different places in the country. Places like the coasts, where wages and cost of living tend to be more expensive, this is not going to help them as much as it will the lower cost places of living. Another issue is that Americans who have direct deposit bank accounts with the IRS, they're going to see their payments arrive in a few weeks. But those who have not set up direct deposit, they may have to wait 4 months to receive their check. So here's a trend and a theme that's going to keep coming up throughout this talk, is that technology is dividing the winners and losers. Those who have adapted and adopted technology are in a much better position than those who have not. Now, there's been some feedback and some thoughts about this, about whether this is going to work or not. Stan Volger, who's an economist at the Conservative American Enterprise Institute, said it's incredibly important that policymakers credibly convince business owners that these conditional loans will indeed be forgiven and that firms' owners will be treated equitably. And he's skeptical that the size of the package is large enough to cover the entire slowdown period. As you saw, this is, we're talking about weeks and not months, or not many months. Another quote from John Laterry of the Economic Innovation Group think tank in Washington says, much of the small business community is facing an extinction level event. Will this bill help? Yes, but the lending capacity needs to prevent mass closures. There are solutions to help mitigate the negative economic impacts on the most vulnerable segments of society, but they do exist, and we as economic developers need to come up with innovative solutions to help those in need. And here are some ways that we can do it. The good part about this is the stimulus bill will cover some of these things. There are those who are not, they've had their hours reduced, but they don't qualify for, or they didn't until, I guess, today, unemployment benefits. But they're distressed and they're in need of existence. New Mexico, pretty much immediately, they have it so that people who have had their wages cut due to coronavirus circumstances can apply for unemployment compensation at the state level, even though they are working reduced hours. So you think about the people who are working remotely or because of school closures or because of social distancing, it's destroying demand for things like Uber rides, and the income drivers receive to take people around. But people staying home can create new jobs in which these rideshare workers can immediately transition. For example, they can serve emerging market demand, such as becoming delivery people. Right now, grocery delivery drivers are experiencing booming business because a restaurant delivery driver can help the rideshare worker keep income coming in and also keep local businesses open and employing their workers. As an example, and you can see this right on your screen right now, this is a 5-star fine dining caterer in Richmond, California. They were negatively impacted from corporate cancellations. So what they did was they reinvented their offerings to provide drive-through, farm-to-table, artisan pizza and salad. They're also willing to deliver the pizza or rent out their private chefs to people's homes. So we as economic developers need to work with the entrepreneurs and businesses in our community to identify how the type of work they are currently doing can be transitioned into some other type of work. And I'll share with you a case study, an example of this. I was talking this week with Kim Bavington. This is out of Las Vegas, Nevada. She has a company called Art Classes for Kids. And her company, and because she's a sole proprietor, her income comes from art lessons that kids attend after school during vacation weeks and during summer art camp. Due to coronavirus, she had to cancel her weekly classes and spring break art camps, and she's nervous about her summer art camps because of the ongoing coronavirus limitations. Her summer camps represent about half of her company's annual revenue. To make things even worse, 70% of the Las Vegas metro's economy is based around hospitality and gaming. So her customers are taking a big hit in their wallet. Ms. Bavington, what she did was she anticipated this is a risky future, so she immediately pivoted to find new revenue by transitioning from face-to-face instruction to online education. And on March 16th, she hosted her first YouTube live art class teaching how to draw Van Gogh's sunflowers. The attendance was incredibly encouraging, and she's able to actually, as our audience grows, she is able to make more and more income because she receives a share of the sale of the art supplies that she uses in her lessons when people purchase it through her website. And this is really interesting. Within, and I think she told me it's 2 hours from her first live streaming of her art class, she made the local news on the NBC affiliate in Las Vegas, talking about how she had transitioned her work. So this is important, we need to figure out how to do this for all the businesses on our community that can make a transition. Businesses in our community are also having emergencies as a loss of revenue may make it difficult or impossible for them to make payroll, pay vendors, or pay the lease. New Mexico immediately jumped in and they were offering emergency loans and lines of credit to cover needed expenses to keep their businesses running. You know, the new federal program, this is going to be an opportunity, and we all need to work with our community banks, especially community banks that really engage locally and have core expertise providing business credit. So the U.S. Small Business Administration is offering small businesses up to $2 million to help cover losses in revenue due to coronavirus. Although I think that the new bill extends this up to $10 million. So make sure that your governors are working with the SBA to make sure that your state can implement these policies. I know many of the people who are on this call right now work for government, and think about what can you do? Because recognizing that small businesses are experiencing a revenue slowdown due to coronavirus and a ban on large public gatherings, the city of San Francisco implemented a policy that defers all business taxes and licensing fees. San Francisco doesn't want businesses to lay off employees, so they're creating a safety net by deferring any cost that they create. And taxes can be deferred for a year without interest, fees, or fine. We also need to engage commercial property owners, because property owners may want their businesses to pay rent on time, but if the small business goes out of business, the property owner is not going to get paid at all. So property owners, banks, and small businesses need to see their interconnected success or failure. And we as economic developers need to help facilitate these difficult conversations and motivate all parties to accept the shared sacrifice so that every business is able to survive. In Los Angeles, Mayor Eric Garcetti temporarily suspended commercial evictions for business owners unable to pay rent due to the coronavirus emergency. Workers who have lost income, they're also going to be unable to pay rent or mortgages. The cities of Seattle and San Francisco, along with the entire state of New York, have temporarily suspended evictions to support residents who've been impacted by coronavirus and can't pay rent. The private sector is jumping in. The Real Estate Board of New York pledged not to execute any eviction warrants for 90 days. We also need to promote local small businesses. And there are direct things that we as economic development organizations can do to encourage our small businesses and local residents to help local businesses. CNN suggests 1, buying gift cards because this puts cash immediately into the business. 2, shop local, because if residents want these local services after this crisis, they need to spend with local businesses today. 3, offer discounts. As an example, food and beverage stores can offer 20% discounts for takeout. 4, order in. Get your small businesses listed on delivery platforms like Grubhub, DoorDash, and Uber Eats. And 5, tip more than usual. If your residents can afford to be a bit more charitable, this is a time when small businesses really need it. It's also quite important to get your local businesses online. We know businesses are going digital, and commerce expands through e-commerce. If you've been trying to get your businesses online, let me tell you, they're focused right now and they're listening because they need to protect their business. And this is a benefit in both the short and the long term. As economic developers, we also need to be policy makers, not just people who work on projects, because elected officials, they want our inputs. We are the expert. And as you think about it, as this money is dispersed, we need to influence it going to the right places. Another thing that we need to do is we need to practice empathy. Because as economic developers, business may be an abstraction, but the reality is that businesses are made up of people who may be emotional, worried, and fearful, and in uncertain times. Entrepreneurs may have all of their savings in their business, and workers may be dependent on their next paycheck to feed their children. We, economic developers, may be exceptional technical professionals, but right now we also need to bring comfort to our communities. One of the things that we're discovering is that corporate site selection visits are declining and disappearing. Economic development organizations need to recognize that, whether it's corporate real estate or site selection professionals, they all can't travel right now. And they don't want to travel because they don't want to impact themselves with getting infected. We as economic developers have to find ways to help this process along because, for some really tactical reasons, one of which is that even before the crisis, a lot of the site selection, early phases of site selection were being done online. As you can see on this graph, the red line is when they are visiting your website and blue is when they're contacting a staff person. So you can see that early on, providing the right online tools is very important. And so with this, I'd like to turn it over to Horton Hobbs to talk a bit about what they're doing in Greater Springfield.
Thanks, Anatalio. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. Just real quickly, just want to send a message to all of our colleagues out there. We're all in this together, and don't underestimate the value you bring to your communities at this time by leveraging the relationships that we all work so hard on developing. We as an organization a few years ago actually started to focus on bringing together a suite of technologies, if you will, around a web platform that would allow us to provide a level of information to site selectors, corporate community regarding our community and the availability of not just sites or buildings, but also sites. And we have utilized, in this particular case, GIS planning's suite of data. So when we were early adopters in our state, we integrated this platform on our website. And we were one of the first in Ohio to actually do it. And it's seamlessly integrated so that companies, site selection consultants, heck, even community members can access an interactive map full of data and information specific to sites and buildings in our community. And what we have found, not just anecdotally, but in real world application, is that, as Anatalio just showed you, site selectors and companies are researching our communities before they're making their decisions, and frankly, before they're even contacting us. And what we have found is that by having these data available on the front end, it takes a lot of the questions and guesswork out of the process for them. Yes, they're going to use their own data to verify the data that we have on our website, but the reality is, if we have it in front of them, they're less likely to look for all of the warts, if you will, to eliminate us. So we implemented this technology early, and we use it often, and it's resulted in some significant project wins in our community. But more important, it's just a great best practice, whether or not there's an emergency or not. You need to control the dialogue as much as you can. And by having great third-party data, great third-party mapping, you make it really, really easy for the consultants in the world to keep you in the game. And I can tell you with firsthand experience, our website, the GIS planning platform that we utilize, is a difference maker. And now more than ever, it's going to be critically important to have these kinds of tools available. There's a lot of noise and a lot of process in these development practices. And these companies are looking for reasons to eliminate us. Having these tools has made all the difference in keeping us at the game. So, now more than ever, you can deploy these tools, whether it's through an email or constant contact or even your own hosted webinar. You can demonstrate to the consultants in the world and companies of the world that you're open for business regardless of this crisis.
Thanks so much, Horton. So those are some great insights, and we're going to ask you for some more of your ideas later on. The next topic is about local businesses, and with many of the big out-of-town business attraction projects drying up, the remaining opportunity for economic growth is local businesses from startups and expansions. Local and small businesses have always been the primary driver of economic growth, including the vast majority of new job creation. This is even more important in the current economic climate. You can see this is looking at net job creation. Green is the jobs created by small businesses, and blue is those created by large businesses. Small businesses from 1993 to 2015 have outperformed large businesses by 425%. So how do we help these businesses, these small businesses that are creating the jobs and sustain the jobs in our community? Well, it's more important in the current economic climate, but local entrepreneurs and businesses also want to minimize their risk of contracting coronavirus through physical contact and meeting with economic development organizations. And this means that we need to provide online business assistance services that reduce or eliminate physical interaction. So I want to now turn it over to Jennifer Graves from town of Gilbert to talk more about what they're experiencing in Gilbert, Arizona.
Thank you so much, Anatalio. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. And before I get started, I also want to just echo Horton's intro comments, but also thank Anatalio, Mark, and Mario for putting this together so quickly and really stepping into this space to bring all of us together. As Gilbert started to mobilize and create and think about creating new tools and programs to immediately address our most at-risk local businesses, we also started to think about how we could help businesses weather the long-term challenges that they're going to face due to this unprecedented economic disruption. Gilbert is a longtime supporter of the SizeUp LBI tool. We implemented it in 2014 and made it available to the entire community free of charge to arm our small businesses and entrepreneurs with those business intelligence tools and resources and information to help make data-driven solutions and decisions for them and for their businesses. So in this current climate, we really saw an opportunity to effectively reintroduce that SizeUp tool to our small business and entrepreneur community and support them in two key ways. The first is what Anatalio just talked about, providing online business assistance services that will eliminate the need for a physical visit or a face-to-face meeting. but also to deliver that industry-specific local market research and that business intelligence that will hopefully support recovery and growth of these businesses, and also to potentially assist those displaced workers that may have that entrepreneurial spirit to potentially start their own businesses. Our team is working to promote this tool to the community in a few key ways. First, we're creating a marketing campaign to push out recovery-specific messages about why using SizeUp and why SizeUp can help. And we started delivering those messages through social media channels this week. We are working to set up virtual meetings with the business and entrepreneurs in our community to understand their information needs, connect those needs to one of the modules within this tool, and walk them through the tool live using their specific criteria. And then lastly, working to create online tutorials that will walk businesses and entrepreneurs through each module in case they want to just do it on their own. So, echoing the sentiments of our department director, we want local business people and future entrepreneurs to be able to use this time to strategize, research, and equip themselves to emerge from this crisis prepared. We've had great success with SizeUp LBI in the past in good times, and we really feel like it's going to help put resources in the hands of businesses and entrepreneurs to give them insight into business that'll help them emerge on the other side of this. So thank you so much for your time, and I'll be delighted to answer questions later on.
Thanks so much, Jennifer. Really appreciate your insights, telling us how your community is managing and mitigating the challenges that your local businesses are having. And I will get more of your insights soon. Another thing that economic development organizations should consider is this issue of what is the training that's going to be necessary. And there are online training services such as edX. Another issue that economic developers are facing is that finding prospects through trade shows has really become challenging or not viable. One of the first signs of the escalating coronavirus pandemic was postponing or the cancellation of many of the major industry conferences that economic developers rely on to fill their pipeline of contacts for potential investment in their community. You can see like Hanover MEAS, the Geneva International Motor Show, MIPIM, the Next Web, South by Southwest, and Mobile Congress. How do we mitigate this risk? Well, there are alternative methods of lead generation that do not involve face-to-face interaction and physical travel are already available to economic development organizations, and you can reallocate budgets to expand these solutions. These include lead generation and FDI databases, which become more important during these times, and online marketing and lead generation consulting services from companies such as Research Consultants International FDI, WavTech, and OCO Global. I was speaking with Bruce Tackman, who is the president of Research Consultants International FDI, and he shared that stay-at-home government policies to limit the spread of COVID-19 has made CEOs easier to reach now than ever before, and that they're now willing to take the time at home to take calls from economic developers. Jennifer, could you talk a little bit about this and your experience?
Yeah, absolutely, Anatalio. So we're a customer of Research Consultants International. We've been partnering with them for several years now on lead generation and support for sales missions into key target markets. We actually had a sales mission planned to Vancouver and Seattle that was supposed to launch next Monday, so the 30th. Obviously, we're not doing that anymore, but the team at RCI worked hard with us to pivot that into a virtual sales mission. We have meetings set up, virtual meetings that we're still going to manage through next week. And we're really looking forward to it, not just because of, certainly continuing to grow the pipeline. That is important. It's going to be difficult with new business attraction, but it's still important for us, but also to hear from businesses directly what they're thinking. We look at it as a way to also gather intelligence about what's happening in their specific industries and if they're still thinking about, expansions and those kinds of things. So we're really looking forward to that and think this is such a great opportunity. But also we just signed on to use FDI 365 lead generation tool to help, again, support that pipeline and continue some outreach for the future and develop a client base. So we're beginning to implement those tools and then continuing to use those resources right now.
Thanks so much, Jennifer. Another thing that economic developers should understand is that as few face-to-face meetings are occurring, we need to move to virtual lead generation technology to have web meetings with business prospects such as Zoom, GoToMeeting, and WebEx. We're using Zoom right now. Right now, they're just overloaded. Yesterday, our webinar actually crashed. It just shows how important these types of technologies are today. Zoom, GoToMeeting, WebEx are all things to consider. Another issue for economic developers is that the coronavirus pandemic is causing global supply chain chaos and delays as businesses and consumers cannot reliably receive shipments from international vendors. This puts your local businesses at risk because they may not be able to build or sell items necessary for them to do business or stay in business. If their supply chain was more diversified and available from locations outside of highly infected regions, and in fairness, now globally, most places are infected, but those that are less impacted would have less risk. WavTech predicts that there will be a shift away from global strategies and toward regional sourcing and value chains. So how do you mitigate this risk? EDOs can help their local businesses identify strategies for risk reduction through a diversified supply chain of vendors. The other opportunity is for new or existing businesses in your community to be the onshore or nearshore suppliers to companies that want to reduce their risk from global supply chain. Economic gardening programs and online economic development software on economic development organization websites help local businesses identify new vendors and customers. There is a recurring trend in all of economic development that to be successful, whether it's during this pandemic or just in the future, technology offers a powerful alternative for the things that are barriers to us today and a competitive advantage to facilitate economic development. It's an advantage whether it's the only option or it's a complement to in-person strategies, whether it's online software for site selection analysis, local business assistance, databases for business prospecting like FDI Market, or web conferencing. Using the highest quality technology is an advantage for EDOs just like it is for all business. So how do you mitigate this risk? If you want to be effective, you can't just go and say, okay, I've got a checklist. I need to do A, B, and C, and I check that I'm doing those. Because simple reality is you need the best solutions if you want the best result. Technology adoption and the use of superior technology is separating the winners and the losers in economic development. Another example of technology use to achieve the experience of personal interaction without the risk of direct physical contact is the use of virtual reality. And I'm showing you an example of Place VR, which is created by a Golden Shovel agency. The picture on the top is with an economic developer, a site selector, a business. They're in a virtual room, even though they're in different states, but the economic development organization can take them on a virtual tour of the community. It's a really interesting technology and certainly something that helps in times like this. Another issue is that foreign direct investment, already projects declined overall in 2019. The impact of coronavirus has accelerated this decline in 2020, according to Dr. Henry Lowendahl, who's the CEO of WavTech. He estimates that Greenfield FDI is down 15% year to date. EDOs and IPAs are confronted with fewer leads as the number of current companies with FDI plans has declined by 25% compared to the last half of 2019. Tourism, entertainment, retail, luxury goods, aviation, real estate, and coal, oil, gas sectors have all seen significant declines in FDI. But so how do we mitigate this risk? Well, not all industries have been as negatively impacted for FDI in the short term, as you can see on this list. There are industries that are experiencing growth aided because they provide solutions to mitigate the coronavirus contact. In a webinar about the impacts of coronavirus on FDI, WavTech recommends that EDOs, 1, focus on FDI professional development, 2, update your investment promotion strategy, business retention and expansion is prioritized and virtual lead generation is strengthened, 3, digital marketing happens through websites, VR, online services, CRM, and conferencing is certainly going to become more important. And finally, 4, strategic targeting be done with corporate intelligence from databases. I know that not all economic development organizations focus on tourism, but the coronavirus pandemic is going to shine a light on just how important tourism is for our communities' economies. Travel and tourism account for 10% of global GDP, 1 out of every 10 jobs, 1 out of every 5 jobs created in the last 5 years. If your local businesses, such as restaurants, stores, hotels, and convention centers, are frequented by customers outside of your region, or you have an airport or you're a tourist destination, you're going to be negatively impacted. So how do we mitigate this risk? So companies are eliminating a lot of travel, and consumers are also reducing their travel. We've got to figure out for the businesses in our community how you can help them with policies that will help customers feel safe visiting their businesses. So, for example, hand sanitizers at the door, social distancing strategies, and marketing promotions to incentivize customer activity. As new public health policies come in place, which may stop people from being able to enter businesses, well, then you really need to step it up and help even more for your local businesses to have online means to make orders and to adjust their operations for easy pickup. There's also significant global capital that companies and individuals need to invest. There's a big impact on the financial markets, shrinking the amount of capital that's out there, but there are always going to be opportunistic investors because, as the saying goes, when there's blood in the streets, buy real estate. So if you can identify these investors and how they can benefit your local economic development, this can be your opportunity in a crisis. And also, there's some companies that are just making so much money and so quickly, they have no choice but to continue to invest their capital. I was talking to a buddy just this week, and their business is booming. He has to hire 50 people this month. So you really need to figure out who are these companies. Now, how do you mitigate this risk? You can focus on the markets that are doing so well that they have to continue expanding, but you may also need to consider non-traditional foreign direct investment, including non-traditional countries you may have not worked with previously. A big challenge for all of our organizations is that it's pretty rare that there's internal capacity and expertise to be able to identify these growing businesses and having the relationships to make these connections. But this is where there are companies out there that do this type of research and analysis, such as WavTech, RCI, Oco Global, or if you have huge budgets, global consulting companies like McKinsey. Finally, the coronavirus pandemic is really changing and impacting relationships. And depending on where you are, people aren't shaking hands. They may not even be doing the elbow bumps, which is what we were doing early on. But we're coming up with other ways to handle this. So how do we mitigate this risk? Economic development as a profession has been built on a foundation of relationships. But as we've learned in the age of Facebook and smartphones, not all relationships have to be face-to-face. Technology has created new ways to create and sustain relationships. For economic developers, the services they provide on their website, for example, local business assistance and site selection analysis, and the ways they leverage technology for communication. So, for example, web meetings and virtual reality, these are going to become more important. For St. Patrick's Day, my family and 4 other families, we all got together to celebrate and drink Irish beer. And we did so. All of our kids were involved. But here's the difference. And this is something I've never done before, is we all did it over a Zoom meeting. And we did it even though we were all in different cities. And we were on that call for over 2 hours, trying to behave like we were all around a dinner table together. So it's possible that we can do this in our personal lives, and we can certainly do it also in our professional lives. A lot of things that used to be once in a century occurrences, such as extreme weather disasters, financial meltdowns, and public health pandemics, appear to be becoming more frequent. In addition, the situation may force companies and economic development organizations to push forward with new ways of working, which maybe we were experimenting with before, but now it's going to become normal ways of working. Remote work, communications through teleconferencing, online collaboration software such as Slack, these are going to become normal ways that we do business. Joe Bruselis, who's the chief economist of RSM, said, "We're about to conduct a grand experiment in the United States. We're going to figure out exactly every task that's part of work that can be done remotely." Learning from these crises can make our economic development organization stronger today and tomorrow by implementing the programs and services which are more resilient in unpredictable times. It also requires educating your constituencies, including the elected officials, board of directors, and residents that you serve, so they have realistic expectations about what your EDO will be able to deliver during unexpected shocks to the local, regional, or global economy. This crisis is certainly a danger to public health all over the world, but it's a danger to our local economies. However, it's also an opportunity to have better economic development and results than the EDOs that do not react strategically to this danger. And this can only happen through economic developers like you taking action now. Also, difficult economies don't only mean bad things. Successful companies have been created during difficult economic times. Uber, Airbnb, WhatsApp, Square, Pinterest, Slack, and Twilio were all started in 2008 and 2009. For most economic developers, there's never been a time in our professional careers that there's ever been as many challenges and as much work that we need to do to support the workers and businesses in our community than today. This is the type of event that will require the best execution, all the training and preparation of our entire professional life. We've never been more in need than we're needed today. As economic developers, we're also community leaders. As leaders, we do not have the convenience of waiting it out. We must lead and be part of the solution to help our communities through these turbulent times by using all of the resources we have to make things better. With that, I will turn it over to Mark for questions and answers, and Horton, Jennifer, and I will do our best to answer your questions.
Yeah, fantastic job, Anatalio. Everybody, I hope you learned as much as I would expect you to. Thank you for Jennifer and Horton for chiming in as well. We're going to open it up for questions now. And I got a few coming into me. So I'm going to start off asking all of you how you think entrepreneurship specifically is going to be affected in the near immediate future by the coronavirus.
This is Horton. I was writing some notes while there was the conversation going on and Anatalio was presenting. I wrote to myself, this will create a new wave of entrepreneurs. I think this is the time where entrepreneurial development will absolutely become a firestorm in our communities. And we have to think critically about how we support and create an ecosystem to support entrepreneurial development.
I would agree with Horton, and I was thinking about that too. And I really appreciated Anatalio adding the last bit about all the companies that were created in 2008 and companies that we rely on now for day-to-day work and activity. I agree. I think we're going to see a boom in entrepreneurship and people starting companies, and that's why one the tools that we can provide now are really important, like SizeUp LBI, which helps, people identify customers and suppliers and, understanding, how certain businesses can perform and, just the connectivity that this tool has to up to the minute data. So as data changes and information changes through the economic, crisis, that will be updated and provide such great resource to our entrepreneurs. So I'm hopeful that'll continue to grow.
So what I see is that there's going to be a coming wave of voluntary and involuntary entrepreneurship. There are some people who are business owners by choice. There are others who are secluded at home due to government restrictions or thinking about, okay, I've always wanted to open up a business and now I'm going to plan for it. But there's also going to be people who are going to be forced into self-employment as a result of being laid off from their company, or these companies are being closed because of the coronavirus crisis. So the projected impact on the economy and unemployment has a variety of different projections. I think that we probably all heard U.S. Treasury Secretary Mnuchin say that the virus could raise the U.S. jobless rate 20% if the government does not intervene. JP Morgan projected unemployment to soar from 3.5% to 6.25% by mid-year of 2020, and other forecasts have seen unemployment rise as high as 9%. With this level of people unemployed who may need to become self-employed to meet their basic needs, there's going to be many people without the skills, background, information, or training to start and run their businesses. In terms of what can be done, I think first, state and federal government needs to allocate additional funding to expand the work of SCORE, SBDC, and nonprofit business assistance organizations. At the local level, economic development professionals are going to have to pivot the work that they're doing to support these local businesses, small businesses, and entrepreneurs. And then also online business assistance software and platform services. Those are designed to scale to serve large audiences because they're not limited by human resources. So if you implement these, they should really help entrepreneurs so they can learn how to start a business, access market research for business planning, and then receive training how to operate a business. So I think entrepreneurship and local businesses become more important. I think Horton and Jennifer hit it right on the head in terms of
I was going to say, well said by all three of you. I have a question specifically for Horton. Somebody's wanting to know how you're spending your time. So how are you transitioning from day-to-day work to being a resource right now for your community? You'd mentioned that.
Yeah, great question. And the guy that asked that's a good friend of mine, so it was probably to them. But the reality is, this job is a relationship business, as we all know, and Anatalio, said it's a contact sport. It certainly is. It's just a little bit different today. Where we have pivoted, and I'm going to predict right now that Zoom becomes a Webster's dictionary word, just like Google did for searching. Zoom is going to be for conference calls, and no, we're not paid by Zoom, but it's pretty interesting how everybody talks about Zoom. What we're doing, though, is hosting a lot of Zoom meetings for our members. So we're a chamber of commerce that has an economic development function and a convention and visitors bureau function altogether. And so we have found that in times of crises, and even though it was always this way before the crisis, a chamber of commerce, a convention and visitors bureau, an economic development entity, in many regards, are kind of the go-to organizations in communities for resources. And it's playing out that way in our community. So over the last few days, we've done webinars where we hosted our president of our county commission, our city manager, and our health commissioner with our president and CEO of our Chamber of Commerce to just proactively talk about what is going on, what the public health orders mean for our business community, and how we can pivot. Tomorrow, SBA is joining me in a conference call, webinar, Zoom meeting with our membership to talk specifically about navigating the new SBA guidelines and getting access to the loan programs. So it's not the traditional economic development that we've all grown accustomed to, but really I would argue it is traditional economic development. It's about building relationships and leveraging the most important asset that we have as economic developers, and those are the relationships that we develop. We can cut through the red tape that many times can't be cut through by others because of those relationships. So that's really what we're doing right now. We sent out emails strategically. Amy Donahoe, our Director of Workforce Development, myself, our CEO, Mike McDormand, we sent out emails to many of our corporate leaders asking, or just simply saying, we're not here to answer all your questions or raise questions. We're here when you need us, and know that we're going to be right here as you have needs in the community. And I cannot tell you how many times people responded with just a thank you. And that thank you will really drive us into the future and shine a light on how important our roles are in our community. But remember, it's not about us. It's about our community and the important resources we can bring to bear. So that's what we're doing every day.
Yeah. Fantastic answer, Horton. I mean, I couldn't agree more. When a natural disaster happens, people are going to remember what you did in those moments. And now it's happening for all of us. So what you do now is certainly going to be remembered in the near and far future.
I want to follow up because the three of us were on a call before this webinar started, and you were talking about how things have changed for you and what your workday is like. And I feel like it's so important that other economic developers hear that. Can you say a little bit more about your workday and what you're doing and not doing anymore?
Yeah, thanks for that. I mean, literally, my days have turned to 16 to 18-hour days, literally fielding calls and just being an ear to businesses. I'm in Ohio, so we have tier one auto suppliers, we have OEMs, and how they respond to their customer is really important. And so it's really just being more of a consultant and a navigator, and really all the other stuff that we used to do. The proactive site visits, those kinds of those are on the downturn. Something you mentioned before, Anatalio, about how we will change BR&Es and those kinds of things. I'm telling you, I think this technology is going to change the way we do site visits with our BR&E programs, and I think it's probably a good thing. So we're really just, I can tell you, I am far more attached to my computer and my phone than I have ever been. And I'm not working harder. I'm just working smarter, but I'm working longer hours because it's just what it takes right now. I think we all are.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. And along those same lines, there were people asking while you were talking about your GIS planning software that you have on your website. A person had asked that, site visits and technology, are companies actually making location decisions right now? And then another person had just asked, how are you tactfully reaching out to attraction projects? Because it feels kind of wrong, which it seems like Horton, you've just answered that question. You're really putting that on pause, if that's fair to say. And then on the flip side of that, it's fortunate that you have software on your website to where people who are looking at any site or building can do that on their own via your website while you're working day to day with the businesses that need it now. If that's fair to say.
Yeah, no, Mark, I think that's right on. The reality is the attraction projects are important and they will continue to be important. But what is more important right now, in my opinion, are the companies that already have invested in our communities. In fact, during this time, we've had 4 corporate site selection RFI calls in the state of Ohio, 2 of which I could and can respond to. The reality is it's not a high priority right now. So referring them to those tools is important. But what's more important in my community, and I would imagine for many of those on the call, it's really what we're doing to the existing companies in our community. And I just will refer them tactfully or actually proactively to our website at this point and not spend the resources that are few right now on being proactive with them. I'd rather spend our resources on helping those that are already here. So you still have to be there and you have to be in the game. But I think more now than ever before to be able to say to a consultant, I know you need a 24-hour turnaround, but that's not our top priority as a community. I think we'll buy some time now.
That's great. So, Jennifer, we've been in contact with you over the last few days and preparing for this, and you are as busy as any time ever. I mean, probably all of us are feeling that way. What are some of the things that have changed in your work and in terms of who it is that you are working for and supporting and helping?
Sure. Our team, the town closed down and moved to 100% work from home basically last Monday. So this is week 2 of that. It happened pretty abruptly, and our team has been, I don't want to say playing catch up, but really playing catch up a little bit as we're starting to reach out and really mobilize over the last week on each of our fronts. Our office does tourism and redevelopment in addition to traditional economic development with attraction and retention expansion. And who we're really reaching out to, though, on that traditional side is those existing clients. There was a question earlier about are people making location decisions. We had 2 very active projects about ready to close. So we are reaching out to them and understanding where they're at. One of them has been put on hold for a little bit of time. And we haven't been able to connect with her. It's mostly just reaching out to our existing businesses. We're interested not only in the retail businesses and restaurants that are experiencing tremendous burden impact right now, but also across those industry sectors and reaching out individually to each of those industry sectors and the key businesses there to understand what they're doing. So we've really shifted, honestly, to almost 100% business expansion and really taking it, like I say, taking it old school. And just dialing numbers, I think, is what I said the other day on the phone, not to my team in a tongue-in-cheek kind of way, to really get out and make those personal connections with businesses. Like you all were saying before, it's relationships, and we have to build relationships a little differently now. And I think that personal connection from us and that personal call to say, we just want to check in on how you're doing. At this point, we don't really have an agenda in terms of reaching out other than to say, you're important to us and we're thinking about you and we want you to know we're still here as your resource. what is your industry experiencing? So how is this affecting you? And how can we best help you? What is that? Is that a connection to policymakers? Is that a connection to, customers? What is it that's going to help you the most, if you need anything right now? So that's really how we've pivoted, and we're all just mobilized and calling everybody.
Yeah, fantastic. Great answers from both of you. And I can say we've done this webinar, literally we're probably over 1,000 now this week that we've shown this to. And every single economic developer, I can say probably 100% has kind of gone the same direction. They're taking care of those who are already in their community, and that is becoming the priority.
Mark, you can give us the next question.
It looks like I've been scouring through them. We've had several come in, and sometimes they'll send them to individuals. So definitely worth looking on Anatalio to see if you've had any pop in specifically for you.
Okay.
Because I'm scouring through the group
one.
I think we've covered.
There's too much to manage, but I do see one, which is from Tony, who asked, do we foresee a reduction of shift away from incentives? Anyone want to grab that, or I can take it?
I just had this conversation this week, so I'd be certainly happy to weigh in on where we're at.
Go for it.
Yeah, I'll answer this in two ways. First, in my mind, as I'm thinking about this and sitting here and we're strategizing and we're looking at outreach and we're looking at our projects that are in the pipeline, ones that we've offered incentives to, and we're thinking about, okay, how do we now outreach to them, and what is the organization still willing to support? We've had those conversations with our leadership. My gut told me early on that there's no way we would put an incentive package in front of our city council while people are closing their businesses and losing their jobs. It never has to be an either or, right? But that was just my emotional, personal response. I believe in the power of utilizing incentives for the right jobs and the right projects, and how you can help grow your economy and attract the right folks and things to your community. But there's that kind of emotional aspect of what people might be experiencing themselves in other industry sectors that are declining. The response coming back from our leadership so far has been, the discussion is still on the table. And we still want to understand what this could bring to us. We're still interested in job creation and job creation from a let's ramp up retention expansion and make sure we're doing everything we possibly can for our local businesses and our existing companies. But we're still interested in doing our core work. I think Horton said it perfectly in his last response. Our mission is still focused on a large part business attraction. And so how can we continue to bridge those two things? And so right now it's not off the table in our conversations. But I think it also will depend on how it plays out, the situation that we're in. But right now, it's not off the table.
I'd like to also tackle that. There's a really interesting article written by Mark Barbash, and you guys can access it through that LinkedIn group that Mark sent a link to. And I'll quote so Mark is the former executive with the state of Ohio. And he said that traditional, and I'm quoting, traditional incentive programs will not be effective in the recovery. Most incentive programs focus on new jobs, new capital investment, new innovation. In the post-coronavirus economy, survival will be the priority. Funds invested by local and state government will be in short supply. Political and policy leaders would do well to rethink their approach to incentives and focus on truly impactful, measurable, accountable investments. They may have to be more flexible, but in the long run will be more productive. And I think that, so that's, I'll end the quote with that. But his point is that there's going to be some massive changes that are happening, one of which is it's back to basics. And there's going to be a focus on survival instead of new jobs and new investment. So these are things that we should definitely consider. And boy, I think Jennifer hit it. I mean, thank you for sharing that, is kind of what are the optics around these types of incentives when we may need that money for survival, for the businesses that are already in town who really need the support, because they're the ones who've been paying taxes in our communities all along.
Exactly. And I think if we're able to, at the local level, we're trying to think of ways that we can pivot the use of incentives. And Gilbert has always used in our local based kind of programming, and we don't have a formal program. We just have a very flexible approach to providing assistance with job growth and or job retention. And we've traditionally used incentives to do both, for retention and for expansion as well as attraction. So we're thinking about ways that we can maybe create some programs at the local level that would enhance and fill a gap for what's being done at the federal and state level for helping businesses survive and get back on their feet, and maybe pivot our approach to also include a program for that, which I think would also help us if we were to go down a path of still providing some support on the attraction side as well. And so that's what our team's, one of the things that our team has been focused on is how to kind of create that program outline and then advocate for that at our leadership level to help them get on board. Because it may be for industries that don't meet that typical threshold of an incentive, like the retail groups and some of those where you're not typically providing support because of wage levels, and again, investment and some of those things. So we're trying to figure out how we can balance that and provide that comfort to the community while trying to do both. And we still don't have the answer yet. It's just what we're focused on.
I am pleasantly surprised at how many people are still on this webinar. It hasn't dropped off that much, which shows that the content and economic developers really want this information. However, I know we could talk about this all day and we're not going to. So if you want more information, I encourage you to go on to the LinkedIn group that was sent out to you. If you're in LinkedIn, you can type in Economic Development Leadership and you can find it. I'd like to thank the Arizona Association for Economic Development, the Kentucky Association for Economic Development, the Mississippi Economic Development Council, Oregon Economic Development Association, the Ohio Economic Development Association, Southern Economic Development Council, Tennessee Economic Development Council, Texas Economic Development Council, and the Washington Economic Development Association for all partnering and supporting this. We know that there were economic developers who couldn't get in on this because we were oversubscribed. We will look at getting this information to them or having an additional webinar.
Thank you to Horton. Thank you to Jennifer. Thank you to Anatalio. These are industry leaders. A lot of you out there are industry leaders. Please continue to keep this conversation going because great ideas are happening, and we want to hear from you in the future. Thank you to everybody, and we will talk to you soon.